He was just a 16-year-old boy flying home. So why was he told to leave his seat for someone else? Miles Ellington had no idea that his quiet decision on Flight 2087 would expose a deeply rooted problem hidden above the clouds. In first class, dressed neatly, polite, composed yet still, the flight attendant tapped his shoulder and asked him to move, not because he had done anything wrong, but because a wealthy white passenger didn't want to sit near him. What happens when you refuse to disappear, when you speak without yelling, when your father is not just another black man but the CEO of the airline? This isn't just about a boy and a plane, it's about legacy, dignity, and a seat that became a symbol of silent resistance. But who was really behind the decision? What happened just 7 minutes later that shocked the world? And how did a single flight launch a nationwide reckoning? Get ready for a story that will stir your heart, challenge your conscience, and stay with you long after the landing gear comes down. If this intro already has you curious, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's take off together. The sun was just beginning to rise over Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. A low mist clung to the tarmac, giving the runways an almost dreamlike glow. Inside Gate 18B, the mood was still and sleepy. Most passengers sipped overpriced coffee in silence, their eyes bleary, glued to phones or gate monitors. Jasper Ellington sat quietly beside his son, Miles, a thick book open in his hands. He wasn't reading it. He hadn't turned the page in 10 minutes. Miles didn't speak either. He sat with his backpack on his lap, earbuds in, but no music playing. Just the silence between father and son, layered in things unsaid. This wasn't a vacation. They were headed to Washington, D.C., for something that weighed on both of them. Jasper had been invited to keynote a major policy summit, his first public appearance since the passing of his wife, Camille, 9 months earlier. The invitation wasn't just professional, it was personal. Camille had helped craft the summit's founding principles before her cancer took her too soon. Miles had asked to come with him. He never asked for things. Jasper hadn't hesitated. Flight 616 to Washington, D.C. Now, board and diamond and VIP passengers. Jasper stood, pulling a soft leather duffel from beneath his seat. He motioned gently to Miles, who took out one earbud and followed. They were the first two to walk the jet bridge. Flight attendants at the aircraft door smiled mechanically. One of them, a tall woman with red-streaked blonde hair and a pressed navy uniform, scanned Jasper's and Miles's boarding passes. Her name tag read Kendra Ellington, VIP. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Ellington," she said, a little too cheerily. Then she glanced at Miles. "You're both traveling together." "Yes," Jasper answered softly. "That's my son." Kendra's smile didn't fade, but it paused. "Of course. Please enjoy your flight." They walked down the plush carpet of the first-class cabin. Seats were large, sleek, separated by partitions and wood paneling. The kind of flying meant to whisper, "You've earned this." Jasper took his seat in 2B. Miles slid into 2A, the window seat. He let out the faintest exhale. Kendra returned a moment later with a tray of orange juice and champagne. She set one glass before Jasper, then hesitated by Miles. "Actually, excuse me," she said. "I think there's been a mistake." Jasper looked up. "I'm sorry, I believe seat 2A was reassigned. That's Colby Lancaster's seat. Mr. Lancaster is a premium investor with us and has top-tier reservation status." "No," Jasper said, still calm. That seat was booked under my name, for my son. You saw the passes. I understand, Kendra said, her tone cooling. But I'll need your son to move, just temporarily. We'll get this sorted once we're in the air. Miles glanced nervously at his father, then at Kendra. He didn't speak. I'd prefer we not move, Jasper replied, his voice still composed, unless there's been a confirmed reissue. My son's seat is 2A. Please check the manifest. Kendra's lips thinned. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to cooperate. The manifest reflects priority status. Jasper didn't raise his voice. He never did. Then I'd like to see it. Passengers nearby started looking over, the kind of side eyes reserved for other people's drama. Jasper saw them. He always saw them. He had spent decades knowing which rooms he didn't belong in, even after he built them. But Miles didn't. Not like this. He was 17. This was his first time in VIP. Kendra stepped away. Moments later, a man in a sleek gray suit boarded hurriedly behind her. He was tall, white, and clearly annoyed. His cufflinks glittered. Is this the issue, he asked, gesturing at Miles. I need to sit down. Jasper looked at the man, then back at Kendra. Her voice dropped. This is Mr. Lancaster, she said. He's a friend of the company. Colby Lancaster didn't even look at Jasper or Miles. He just gestured again. Let the boy take another seat. There's one in row 4. Plenty of space. Kendra turned to Miles. I'm going to help you to row 4C. Your father can remain here. Jasper slowly stood. He placed a firm hand on Miles's shoulder. You're not moving, he said gently. You sit right here. Then he turned to Kendra. Either you make room for your investor, or you call your supervisor. But we're not giving up a paid, confirmed seat for someone more comfortable with my son being somewhere else. Kendra's composure cracked for just a moment. Her eyes flicked to the rest of the crew. She was aware now, aware of eyes, aware of phones possibly recording, but not enough to back down. I'll get the captain. She walked off briskly. Colby Lancaster slid into 2A anyway, brushing against Miles as though he were invisible. Jasper clenched his fist. He hadn't clenched a fist in years. Miles stood up. I'll go. Dad, he whispered, it's fine. Jasper turned and faced his son fully. No, he said. No, it's not. Then he pulled out his phone. Jasper Ellington tapped his phone with calm precision. His fingers moved like a man signing something sacred. He wasn't angry, not in the way the world usually imagined black men could be. He was centered, grounded, focused. He opened the internal Aureus Air executive interface, something not available to the public, but fully accessible to him. As of last quarter, he held 9.6% of the airline's private equity shares. It wasn't widely known, and Jasper liked it that way. Quiet leverage had always been more useful than loud power. He scanned the live manifest. Miles's name was still on 2A, and Colby Lancaster's reassigned at the gate. Less than 6 minutes ago, no formal override, no documentation. Jasper took a deep breath, turned the screen toward the flight attendant now returning from the cockpit, and said in a tone so soft it pulled silence into the air. This shows my son never lost his seat. Kendra's jaw tightened. There was a manual update, she said quickly, likely due to system prioritization. These changes happen, especially with VIP-level investors. Jasper stared at her. They don't just happen, not without notice, not without consent, not without protocol. Across the cabin, a man in a blue blazer lowered his newspaper. Another woman in business attire leaned forward, lips parted. The energy had changed. Kendra's voice grew defensive. She crossed her arms slightly. "Sir, we're doing our best to accommodate all premium guests. If your son would simply cooperate." "My son," Jasper said, each word crisp, "has already been asked to disappear once today. He won't be disappearing again." Colby Lancaster huffed. "Unbothered. This is absurd," he muttered. "It's a seat. Let the kid take an aisle and let the adults get on with it." Jasper turned slowly. "Mr. Lancaster, you may feel entitled to a particular seat. That's your perception. But what you're asking is not just a logistical shift. You're asking that my son be visibly downgraded so that your comfort remains uninterrupted. In front of a cabin full of people, on record, you may not realize it, but you're not asking for a seat. You're asking for hierarchy. And I no longer recognize yours." A pause. The cabin air felt different now, pressurized, but not by altitude. Kendra turned and stormed toward the front galley. Minutes passed. Miles sat frozen, not in fear, but in confusion. His throat was tight, his cheeks warm. He'd seen his father in boardrooms, at charity galas, on television, but he had never seen this side of him, the quiet storm that didn't rage but revealed. "Dad," Miles finally said, voice low. "I don't want to be the reason the plane gets delayed." "You're not," Jasper replied. "They are, but it's just a seat." Jasper looked at him, then gently placed a hand on his shoulder. "Miles, we don't fight every battle. But this one, we don't walk away from this one. Because it's not about comfort. It's about dignity. Yours, and your children's one day. They're watching, too, even if they haven't been born yet." The cabin door opened again. A woman in black slacks and a gray blazer stepped on. Short hair, firm posture, headset in one ear. "The crew chief, Mr. Ellington," she began. Jasper stood. Her voice softened. "We're working to resolve the situation. I do apologize for the delay. Can I speak to you briefly in the galley?" He nodded. As they stepped into the narrow front alcove, she lowered her voice. "I want to acknowledge that a mistake has clearly been made. I've reviewed the internal log. Your son's seat was manually overridden by a gate staff member under pressure from a loyalty tier request without proper flag review. That's not policy. It shouldn't have happened." "Why did it happen?" Jasper asked. Simply. She hesitated. "Bias, direct or unconscious? I can't know exactly, but it's unacceptable." Jasper let the words settle. "I appreciate your honesty. I'll be issuing a formal incident report once we land. In the meantime, Mr. Lancaster will be reseated in 4C, and the staff will be informed of chain of command protocol. If you prefer to deplane or issue a statement." "Now, no," Jasper said. "We'll stay, and I'll handle this when we land." Back in the cabin, Kendra was already stiff. Her mouth moved in quiet whispers to another flight attendant. She avoided eye contact. Miles was still seated in 2A. Jasper returned. Colby Lancaster had been moved. He was now several rows back, visibly sulking, muttering into his phone. Jasper sat down beside his son. The engine hum deepened as the doors closed, and just before takeoff, Jasper opened a new email draft. Subject: Equity Incident on Flight 616. Recipient: Arias Executive Governance Board. He began typing slowly, with precision, with care. Every word was weighted, every sentence built like a quiet crescendo. He wasn't riding to shame, he was riding to awaken. Because what had happened in row 2A was bigger than a seat. It was an echo of something older, deeper, the constant recalibration of visibility, value, and worth, especially when wrapped in black skin wearing a pressed suit. The pilot's voice came on, crisp and practiced. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Aureus Flight 616 to Washington. D.C. Estimated flight time is 4 hours and 31 minutes. Please ensure all devices are in airplane mode." Jasper looked over at Miles, who still hadn't spoken. The boy just stared out the window, the clouds thick beyond the wing. "Talk to me," Jasper said softly. Miles didn't look at him. "I just don't get why it happens." "What?" "This stuff," Miles said. "Why people like her just assume we're in the wrong place. Why it feels like we have to prove everything." Jasper nodded slowly. "I don't always get it either," he said. "But I do know we don't have to carry their confusion. We just need to remember who we are." Miles finally turned, and for the first time that morning, he smiled. Just a little. The seatbelt light blinked overhead as the aircraft gently tilted into climb. Jasper Ellington sat still, fingers clasped loosely, eyes closed. The plane surged upward, but his mind stayed grounded. He had trained himself, long ago, to breathe through tension. Stillness was his weapon. Silence was his currency. Beside him, Miles pressed his cheek to the window. The clouds looked like mountains frozen in place, all soft edges and bright light, but his stomach was still knotted. He had never seen his father confront someone like that, not in public, not that sharply, and definitely not for him. Part of him felt proud, the other part embarrassed, exposed. Across the aisle, a woman in a tailored red blazer caught Miles's eye and smiled gently. She looked maybe mid-40s, with tired eyes and kind features. She gave him a little nod, the kind adults give when they want you to know they saw what happened and they're quietly cheering for you. Miles nodded back, almost grateful. The flight attendants passed through with drinks. No one stopped in row 2. Jasper finally opened his eyes. His voice was soft when he spoke. "Do you want to talk about it?" Miles hesitated. "I'm not sure what to say." "You don't have to be sure, just start." Miles looked down at his hands. "It's not just about the seat," he said finally. "It's about how easy it was for them to think I didn't belong there." He paused. "Sometimes I feel like I'm always waiting to be mistaken for someone who doesn't belong. At school, at restaurants, even walking into your office building. Like I need to prove I'm allowed." Jasper listened without interrupting. I guess I didn't want to make a scene because part of me felt like maybe it was better to just disappear. Jasper's jaw tightened slightly. His calm never cracked, but Miles could sense something shifting under the surface. "Do you know why that hurts the most?" Jasper asked quietly. Miles shook his head. "Because you've been raised with everything I didn't have. Opportunities. Rooms I had to break into just to be heard. And still, someone made you feel like you should shrink." The words sat between them for a long moment. Jasper continued, voice low but steady. "There's a reason I speak softly. It's not because I'm unsure. It's because the world has taught people to hear my voice as a threat before I've even finished a sentence." He paused. "And I didn't fight my way into these rooms just to raise a son who thinks he has to disappear to be safe." Miles swallowed. A beat passed before he spoke again. "Can I ask you something? Always. Do you ever get tired of it? Always having to hold yourself so carefully. Be calm. Be reasonable. Make everything make sense to everyone. Jasper smiled, a tired, knowing smile, every day. Miles leaned back in his seat, his mind moving slower now, deeper. The drink cart rolled by. One of the junior flight attendants, newer, younger, clearly nervous, offered them water. No small talk, just a quick glance and a nod. That was fine. Miles preferred it. Jasper tapped his phone again. There was already a reply. From Eleanor Bainbridge, subject re-equity, incident on flight 616, time 10:48 a.m. EST. Jasper, I just read your message. This is unacceptable. I've already contacted compliance and PR. Please know that as board chair, I will personally follow through. Thank you for documenting with clarity and restraint. I'm aware restraint should not be necessary, but I recognize the effort nonetheless. Eleanor, he let the message sit. The world moved too fast these days. Sometimes it was better to wait, to let the air shift. Then something else caught his eye. A second message, this one internal, Aureus Comms internal urgent flagged tag, incident flight 616. The airline was already drafting a memo. Jasper knew what that meant. The spin cycle had begun. Words like isolated error or staff and miscommunication were probably being tested already. Apologies that smoothed things over without ever naming the root. But he wouldn't let it drift that way. Not this time. He scrolled to the end of the draft. There was a small note, pending board review. He tapped reply. Language must reflect ownership. Do not bury systemic bias beneath process failure. I will offer final language if needed. Jasper. Then he put the phone away. Miles glanced over. You emailed the board, didn't you? Jasper nodded. What did you say that you matter? Miles exhaled. Just that. A soft breath, like a weight loosening in his chest, down the aisle. Two teenage girls with backpacks were whispering and pointing, not at them, but at Colby Lancaster, who was seated further back now, looking increasingly agitated. He had taken off his blazer. His laptop was out. He looked like a man preparing for damage control. Jasper didn't glance his way. He didn't need to. The real reckoning wasn't in the cabin. It was in the silence, in the people who saw, in the ones who were watching now to see how the story would unfold, how it would be told, whether it would disappear. Because too often, these moments were sanded down, the sharpness taken away, the discomfort padded, the truth edited into something more digestible for audiences that didn't want to reckon with their own reflection. Not this time. Not while Miles was watching. The woman in the red blazer across the aisle leaned forward again. This time, she spoke. I saw what happened at boarding, she said gently. I just want to say thank you for holding your ground. A lot of people wouldn't. Jasper turned, offering a small nod. I didn't do it to be thanked. I know, she said. That's why it mattered. She leaned back, left them alone again. Miles tilted his head toward his father. What happens next? Jasper looked at his son. The boy wasn't really a boy anymore. He was standing at the edge of manhood, and Jasper could see the questions forming behind his eyes. That depends, Jasper said, on how many people stay quiet, and how many choose to say something when no one's clapping. For the first time since boarding, Miles smiled, a real one. The clouds beyond the window had thinned. Blue sky opened wide in every direction. At 30,000 feet, it was oddly quiet. Not the mechanical hum of the engines or the occasional chime of the seatbelt sign, that background noise always lived there. But the cabin, usually bustling with idle chatter or clinks of plastic cups, had fallen into an unusual hush. Miles noticed it first. He could feel it, like the silence after someone drops a glass in a crowded room, the kind where everyone waits, glancing sideways, not saying what they're all thinking. He leaned back in his seat and stared at the ceiling panel above. The cool air hissed from the nozzle, but he barely noticed. His mind had drifted elsewhere, backwards, back to the school cafeteria 3 years earlier, 7th grade, February. The day the teacher handed out paper outlines of famous American figures for Black History Month. He remembered the crayon box being passed down the table. One girl picked up the peach-colored crayon and held it up. "This one's skin color," she said, matter of fact. A pause. Miles had looked down at the Frederick Douglass drawing in front of him, then at his own hand. Not peach, not even close. The room went still. Nobody looked at him, but he felt it anyway. It wasn't hate, it was erasure. That had been the first time he realized there was a difference between being present and being seen. Back on the plane. Miles blinked and returned to now. Jasper, beside him, was reading a legal briefing on his phone, but Miles noticed the shift in his father's expression. A slight furrow, a stillness in his jaw. Then Jasper turned the screen slightly toward him. Miles leaned in. There it was. A tweet. A photo taken by someone a few rows back, probably from their phone during boarding. It showed Miles standing awkwardly beside seat 2A while Colby Lancaster sat down with a smug smile. The caption read, "This just happened on Flight 616. Teen removed from VIP seat by airline staff. Guess what? He's the son of a black CEO. Stay tuned." Retweets were climbing by the second. Below it, another passenger had posted a follow-up. Boarding staff said his seat wasn't assigned properly, then gave it to a white passenger who boarded late. His father said nothing at first, then he made a call. Crew got real quiet, real fast. Aureus Airlines was now trending. Jasper closed the screen and tucked the phone into his blazer. Not to hide anything, just to set it aside. He exhaled. "We've crossed the line from incident to headline," he said quietly. Miles didn't speak. He just nodded, unsure what that meant. Yet, Jasper's voice dropped even lower. Not a whisper, just controlled. "From here on, everyone's watching for how we behave. Every glance, every word." Miles glanced down the aisle. He saw someone pretending to read a magazine, but clearly peeking toward them. "Do you think we did the right thing?" he asked. Jasper looked at him for a long moment. "I think sometimes what's right feels deeply uncomfortable." Then a soft chime. One of the flight attendants approached, cautiously. It wasn't the same one from boarding. This woman looked older, calmer. Her badge read Monica. She bent slightly to speak to Jasper, keeping her voice respectful but firm. "Mr. Ellington, the captain asked me to extend his apologies. He wasn't aware of the incident until moments ago. He's reviewing the report filed by ground staff now." Jasper nodded. "Once. We'll wait to hear from him directly." Monica hesitated, then added, "I also want to say I'm sorry, sir. I saw what happened. It wasn't right." Jasper gave her a small, grateful look. Nothing theatrical, just real. "Thank you." She walked away. Miles whispered, "Was that for us or for the people watching?" Jasper glanced at him. "Maybe both. Doesn't mean it wasn't sincere." Behind them, somewhere in row 6 or 7, a whisper of raised voices broke through. Colby Lancaster again. He was speaking to someone on his Bluetooth headset. not loud enough for details, just enough to hear the tension. Jasper didn't turn around. He had learned, early in life, that the most powerful protest was often stillness. Let others scramble. Let others chase the narrative. He would write it. A vibration from his watch. He tapped it. Another message from Eleanor Bainbridge. Draft revised. We've removed the language softening staff conduct. I've added your sentence about belonging. Would you review one final time? He smiled to himself. Miles asked, "What was that, Eleanor?" "She's editing the company's statement, and they're actually listening to you. They are now," a pause, "because they know the world is." Miles turned back toward the window. The clouds had given way to soft blue skies and distant land far below. Highways, farms, rivers cutting lazy curves through the earth. He spoke without looking. "I don't want to be a headline." "Dad?" Jasper nodded. "You're not. You're a person. But sometimes stories need names, and sometimes the world needs to be reminded that the name matters." Then he added something softer, "And sometimes that's the only way to make the next boy's name easier to say." Miles blinked. "Were you ever in a story like this?" Before me, Jasper considered, "Yes, but no one wrote it down." They sat in silence for a while, not the awkward kind, the meaningful kind. At the back of the plane, someone coughed. Overhead, the seatbelt sign lit up again. And then the intercom clicked on. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking." The voice was measured, calm, not mechanical, not distant. I want to take a moment to personally acknowledge that a seating discrepancy occurred during boarding involving two of our passengers. I understand this situation may have caused discomfort or concern to others on board. A long pause. As captain, I am responsible not only for the safety of this aircraft, but for the dignity of everyone aboard. That was not upheld today, and I offer my personal apology to those affected. Jasper raised his eyebrows slightly. "Not bad," he thought. And finally, the captain added, "I thank those who remained calm. We will continue our flight as scheduled and will provide further communication once we land." The intercom clicked off. Miles looked over. That was unexpected. Jasper offered a small smile. Words don't fix everything, but the right ones can open a door, as the plane continued its quiet hum across the sky. Miles leaned back, eyes heavy, heart a little lighter. This wasn't over, but maybe it was beginning. The moment the captain's voice faded, a subtle ripple moved through the cabin. Some passengers gave approving nods. A few returned to their books or screens, but most, like Miles, remained in a quiet state of alertness, the kind that doesn't let you rest because you know something isn't quite finished. Jasper exhaled slowly. His eyes were closed, but he wasn't sleeping. He was thinking, listening, counting. He had always had this habit, noticing the number of seconds between an apology and a resolution, the space where performative regret either becomes accountability or dissolves into nothing. "Are you okay?" Miles asked, keeping his voice low. Jasper opened his eyes and looked at his son. The boy was trying to be composed, but his leg kept bouncing. Subtle. Nervous. "I'm here," Jasper said gently. "And I see you." Miles nodded, but didn't smile. Instead, he looked out the window again. "I keep wondering if I did something wrong. You didn't, but I keep hearing that guy's voice. The way he said, 'You sure this is your seat?' Like I was sitting at someone else's dinner table." Jasper reached over. placed his hand briefly on Miles's shoulder. Firm, present. Disrespect often arrives with a smile. That doesn't make it less dangerous. Miles didn't speak again for several minutes. He just let that thought land and spread through his chest like heat. It didn't solve anything, but it made sense in a way school never taught him. At that moment, Jasper's phone vibrated. He glanced at the screen. A text from Eleanor Bainbridge. Board meeting moved to emergency session. Internal Ops wants pre-clearance on your next public statement. PR has drafted a neutral version. Too neutral. I advised against it. Your move. He tapped the screen and typed. I'll send a direct message from my office after we land. Use my tone, not theirs. This isn't a Brandon problem. It's a cultural exposure. He hit send. Then looked up and noticed Miles staring at him. What Jasper asked. You do this a lot, don't you? What's that, manage people, while managing yourself? Jasper smiled softly. That's what fatherhood is, and leadership too, if it's done right. Miles turned back to his window, thoughtful again, but this time a little less anxious. Something had shifted. Then a quiet vibration buzzed in Miles's pocket. He reached in, checked the phone. Signal was weak, but a message had come through from a contact saved as Naomi B., Earth Science and Unfiltered Opinions. The text was short. Saw what happened. You okay, just so you know, they did something similar to my cousin in Charlotte. I'm furious, but also, I'm not surprised. Want to talk later? Miles stared at the screen. He hadn't spoken to Naomi in months. They used to sit next to each other in sophomore year biology. She was one of the few who never flinched around uncomfortable topics. Always straightforward, smart, kind in her own way. He didn't know what to say, but he typed anyway. Yeah, I'm still figuring it out. It was bad, but he's here, so I'm not alone. The reply came seconds later. That part matters, more than you know. He tucked the phone away, then leaned his head back. He wasn't ready to sleep, but for the first time in hours, he let his shoulders settle, just a little. Meanwhile, in the cockpit, Captain Jordan McNeil was finishing a call with ground control. His voice remained calm as he said, Yes, I'll file a statement after we land. No, I haven't spoken to the board directly. My focus is the passengers right now. We'll have more to talk about when I'm not flying a steel tube full of humans across the sky. He hung up, sighed, and glanced toward the co-pilot, who gave him a look. You know this is going to be on the front page tomorrow, the co-pilot said quietly. I know, McNeil replied, but I'd rather be remembered for doing the right thing in turbulence than for keeping the seatbelt light on while everything burned. Back in row 2, a soft voice interrupted the quiet. It was Monica again. She approached Jasper, holding something in her hand, a folded sheet of paper. I thought you might want to see this, she said, handing it to him. Jasper opened it. It was a handwritten note, in uneven script, signed only with an initial R. The note read, My daughter is mixed. She's only 5. She saw what happened today and asked me why they moved the nice boy to the back. I didn't know what to say. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. Thank you for showing her that silence isn't the only option. Jasper closed the note and folded it back slowly. His throat tightened. He handed it to Miles, who read it twice. Then, once more, I don't know who wrote it, Monica added, but I thought it was important that you saw it. Thank you, Jasper said, voice low. She gave a small nod and stepped away again. her presence like a warm shadow that didn't demand attention but made space for healing. Miles held the note for a while, then slid it into his backpack carefully like something worth keeping. And it was. 10 rows back, Colby Lancaster was fuming silently. The conversation on his Bluetooth had not gone the way he expected. He had tried to spin the event to his assistant, to corporate, to anyone who'd listen, but the photos had traveled faster than his narrative. His wife had texted him, too. "You're on the internet. Not in a good way. This better not hurt our foundation work." Colby clenched his jaw. The world was changing, and he wasn't at the center of it anymore. Jasper knew, and so did Miles. The question wasn't whether change would come. It was who would be standing still when it did. Outside, the clouds began to thin. The descent toward D.C. had begun. The city of decisions waited just beneath the horizon. Jasper leaned toward Miles. "When we land, there'll be cameras." Miles nodded slowly. "Do I talk only if you want to?" Miles thought for a moment. "I don't want to say anything until I'm ready." Jasper placed a steady hand on his son's arm. "That is always your right." The seatbelt sign dinged. The plane tilted gently as it began to drop altitude, and somewhere between sky and soil, a father and son realized that visibility was no longer optional. It was a responsibility, but not a burden, not anymore. The landing gear touched the tarmac with a soft thud, the cabin gently rocking as the brakes caught the weight of the descending aircraft. A low murmur moved through the rows as seat belts clicked and passengers instinctively reached for their devices. Outside, the sky was a thick gray veil, soft with early morning mist. Washington Dulles International was waking up to another day. But today, something was different. Jasper Ellington remained still, one hand resting on the folded note Miles had tucked into his lap. It was quiet in their row, yet something charged lingered in the air. Anticipation, the kind that settled in your lungs when you knew the moment you stepped into daylight. Nothing would be the same. Miles glanced toward the window, watching the ground crew pace with unusual urgency. 2 black SUVs with government plates had pulled beside the jet bridge, not standard for a CEO, not even for Jasper. This wasn't coordination, it was containment. He turned to his father, a question already forming on his lips. Jasper spoke first. "There will be cameras. Some are from press, some are not." Miles frowned. "Not some are from the airline. Crisis control. Their goal is to shape what people think happened before we say a word. But we didn't even do anything wrong. That's why we'll be calm and deliberate." Miles shifted in his seat, a mixture of dread and pride sitting on his shoulders like uneven weights. "Do I have to speak?" "No. You only speak if it brings you peace." The seatbelt sign blinked off. Passengers surged to their feet in waves. Jasper and Miles waited, rising only when the aisle began to move forward in earnest. Monica reappeared at their side, her demeanor respectful and reserved. "There's a side exit arranged, if you prefer it." Jasper looked at her, studying her eyes. "And if we don't?" She didn't blink. "Then we walk out the front." The captain already advised the crew to protect that choice. Jasper nodded once. "We'll go forward." She gave a slight smile. "That's what I figured." The two stepped into the aisle together. Miles reached for his backpack. As they began walking, scattered applause erupted from rows behind them. Soft at first, then more steady. Row 12, then 15, then 20. Not loud, not performative, Just real. Real people acknowledging what they had witnessed and who had chosen to stand their ground. Colby Lancaster remained slouched in his seat, his expression unreadable. His phone was still in his hand, screen glowing with emails he could no longer control. There were no applauses for him, only silence and a window view of power slipping from his grip. As Jasper and Miles stepped into the jet bridge, camera flashes burst like distant lightning. A small crowd of reporters had already formed just outside the arrival gate. PR officials in branded blazers stood in a loose line, blocking and redirecting. "Mr. Ellington, a brief word before you speak," one of them called out, stepping forward. Jasper kept walking. "Mr. Ellington." The airline deeply regrets he raised a single hand. Calm, centered. It was not a gesture of dismissal. It was a pause. The man fell quiet. Jasper turned slightly toward him. "When I'm ready, you'll know." They continued walking, flanked now by security and cameras rolling on all sides. Miles stayed close, his eyes scanning everything. For once, the stares didn't sting, not in the same way. Some looked at him with curiosity, others with shame, but a few, especially the black flight staff standing by the corner wall, looked at him with something else entirely. Recognition. He didn't smile, but he nodded once, and one of the flight attendants, a young woman no older than 25, nodded back with eyes shining. Outside the gate, a quiet space had been cleared by airport staff. A podium waited, microphones already in place. Jasper was not surprised. Miles looked overwhelmed, but he held himself tall. A young staffer approached with a press badge. "You're not obligated to speak, Mr. Ellington. We've issued an apology." Jasper gave a small laugh, barely more than a breath. "You've issued a distraction. That's not the same." He stepped up to the podium. Miles stood to the side, just behind. The murmurs hushed as the camera light settled. Jasper looked over the crowd, the staffers, the journalists, and beyond them, the people just watching from the terminal windows, parents with kids, flight crew on break, people holding coffee cups and watching something that felt like history. He began without a script. "I wasn't planning to be part of a national conversation this morning. I was taking my son to Washington for his scholarship interview. I didn't come here to make a statement, but a statement was made anyway." He let that sit. A 16-year-old black boy, sitting in the seat that was purchased for him, was asked to move to accommodate a white executive. When he hesitated, he was pressured. When he complied, he was humiliated. When I confronted the situation, I was told it was a misunderstanding. But let me be clear, systemic behavior is not a misunderstanding. It is a mirror. There was a stir in the crowd, but no interruptions. "My name is Jasper Ellington. I lead a firm that employs over 14,000 people across this country. But before that, I was the kid who got asked if he belonged here. The boy who was moved without apology, who was told to keep his voice down if he wanted to make it in the world." He turned slightly, nodding to Miles. "My son will not carry that silence. He will carry his voice, his dignity, his right to sit wherever his humanity is not negotiable. A beat of silence. I have terminated all licensing contracts with this airline effective immediately. My team has suspended all travel partnerships and hospitality accounts until this company publicly acknowledges not just this incident, but the culture that made it possible." There was a gasp, then a flurry of whispers. Flash bulbs ignited again. "This is not about revenge. It is about responsibility. You cannot advertise diversity in your branding and deny it in your behavior. If you claim inclusion, you must prove it when no one's looking." He stepped back. No applause, just a silence thick with reckoning. Miles approached him quietly. That was a lot. It needed to be, "Did I do the right thing?" Though by telling you to say something, Jasper looked at him, eyes steady. "You did the brave thing. That's always right." A small hand tugged at Miles's sleeve. He turned and saw a girl, maybe 6, brown skin, hair in tiny braids, her mother behind her, watching closely. "My mom said you're the boy from the plane," she whispered. Miles nodded slowly. She smiled shyly. "You looked like a superhero when you stood next to your dad." Miles blinked hard, trying not to cry. He managed a quiet "thank you" before the girl returned to her mother, who mouthed something that looked like "thank you." Jasper placed a hand on his son's back as they walked forward again, past the reporters, past the podium, past the manufactured chaos and into the wide-open concourse. Their car was waiting, but more than that, so was a new world, and they had just stepped into it. The car ride from the tarmac to the private arrivals terminal was quiet, not heavy with silence, but filled with the kind of hush that follows after something breaks. Not violently, not loudly, but deeply. Jasper kept his hand on Miles's shoulder as the SUV moved smoothly through airport lanes. His other hand held his phone, which was vibrating every few seconds. Messages from legal, from press teams, from activist organizations, from airlines trying to distance themselves from what just happened. He ignored them all. Miles stared out the window. His reflection was faint in the glass, overlaid by the blur of movement. He looked older than he had just a day ago. Maybe not in his face, but in how he carried himself. The boy who boarded that plane in San Diego was not the same one now sitting in this black SUV in Washington. D.C. They pulled into a quiet side entrance where luggage was already waiting on a private carousel. Airport personnel had cleared the area, but one figure waited near the claim belt. A girl, mid-teens, dark denim jacket, soft tan hijab wrapped around her head. She stood with her hands clasped in front of her, staring at her sneakers until the doors opened. Naomi. Miles felt something leap inside him, and then sink just as quickly. He stepped out of the car, unsure whether to wave or smile or pretend he didn't see her, but she didn't wait. Naomi walked up to him calmly. Her eyes searched his face, her steps steady. "I saw," she said softly. He nodded, heart pounding. "I didn't know what to do," he whispered. "You didn't have to do anything. You just didn't let them win." Miles blinked, caught off guard by how simple she made it sound. But that was Naomi. She always had a way of cutting straight through the fog. She reached out and touched his wrist gently. "My mom called from the terminal, said people were crying. She didn't even know you were the one from the story until I showed her your picture." Jasper approached quietly behind them, nodding once at Naomi. "You must be Naomi. I've heard a lot about you." She offered her hand respectfully. "It's an honor, Mr. Ellington." "No," Jasper said, eyes kind. "The honor's mine. Anyone who keeps my son grounded is someone I'm grateful for." Naomi blushed and looked down, but her voice was still clear. They tried to make him invisible, but he refused. "You both did." Jasper glanced at Miles, a rare softness settling into his gaze. It was time. Naomi turned toward the carousel as their bags began to appear. She helped pull Miles's duffel off the belt, then stepped aside to let them load the SUV. Before they left, she pulled something from her pocket. A small slip of paper folded twice. My mom wrote something. She doesn't speak much English, but she said you'd understand. Jasper took the note, opened it carefully. Handwritten in Arabic and English, respect is not given to uniforms. It's given to those who protect others when no one is watching. Thank you for protecting your son. Jasper closed his eyes for a moment, then tucked the note into his jacket pocket without a word. Outside, wind stirred faintly as people began to filter back into the terminal. As the SUV pulled away, Naomi and Miles held eye contact through the tinted window. It wasn't romantic. Not exactly. It was just real. Two young people who had witnessed something that peeled back the world a little and saw each other more clearly because of it. In the back seat, Jasper finally checked his phone. One message stood out. It wasn't from his team, not from a journalist. It was from his mother. Saw the speech. You sounded like your father. He'd be proud. That message made his throat tighten. His father, Charles Ellington, had spent decades working as a labor rights organizer. He had been the quiet force behind the public names, the man who taught Jasper to think 5 moves ahead, to speak low but with weight, and to never let someone redefine your worth just because they had a badge or a title. Jasper looked out the window, eyes wet. There had been so many moments in his life where he wished his father could see him. This one felt like the closest he had come. Across the city, reactions had already begun to spiral outward. News outlets were cutting from political commentary to live clips of Jasper's airport statement. Hashtags trended. Corporate boards scrambled. Union groups began releasing open letters of solidarity. Former employees of the airline surfaced on social media, sharing their own quiet stories of discrimination, threats, unspoken quotas, and patterns of reassignment when they made too much noise. One thread had already gone viral. It was a selfie of a young black flight attendant with the caption, "I was told I'd be fired if I ever upgraded a passenger like me. So I never did." Watching Jasper Ellington today, I cried in the break room. Thank you. And it wasn't just the airline. Jasper's speech had rippled into corners people hadn't expected. Parents began sharing stories about their own kids. Students recalled moments they were told to sit at the back. Executives who had always flown private admitted they had avoided first class on commercial airlines because of moments just like Miles's. And still, through all of it, Miles sat quietly in the SUV, earbuds in, listening to nothing. His eyes were closed, his breathing slow. "Are you all right?" Jasper asked gently. "I'm just tired. Not of today, just of how often today happens." Jasper didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small leather journal, the same one his father had used when they marched in Atlanta in 93. The cover worn, the pages still crisp. He handed it to Miles. "I've been writing speeches in this since I was 22. Maybe it's time you start adding your own." Miles ran his fingers over the cover. "What if I don't want to give speeches? Then don't. Use it for poems, questions, letters you'll never send. Just write." Miles opened the first blank page. He didn't write anything yet, but he looked like someone who would. The car turned onto Constitution Avenue, headed toward their hotel. The city's skyline stretched ahead, dignified and gray. They passed the Lincoln Memorial. Jasper looked up at the marble figure, forever seated in silence and strength. Miles, yeah. You ever wonder what would have happened if we stayed quiet? Miles looked at him. No one would have known. But I would have remembered. Jasper nodded slowly. And now I know we were never the problem. The SUV moved forward through the city of monuments. But inside the vehicle, something was being built that wouldn't need stone to stand. The Conrad Hotel in downtown D.C. had never seemed more silent. Jasper Ellington stepped out of the elevator with Miles beside him. A concierge had escorted them through a private entrance, bypassing the lobby, though that hadn't stopped a few guests from staring through the glass. Even in a city used to power, the man at the center of a national storm walking into your hotel was enough to stir whispers. They reached the presidential suite on the top floor. Jasper swiped the key card, and the doors opened with a soft click. Miles stepped in first. It smelled faintly of cedar and lavender. Warm lighting, a tray of sparkling water, and cut fruit on the counter. Someone had turned on classical music. Low, like a memory someone forgot to turn off. Miles stood at the window and stared at the skyline. Lights blinked across buildings like breathing in slow rhythm. From this height, the city looked quiet, peaceful, but peace is an illusion when your name is suddenly a hashtag. Jasper poured 2 glasses of water and handed one to his son. He didn't speak. Not yet. Let the silence make room first. After a while, Miles turned to him. How long until they make you the villain? Jasper raised his eyebrows. That was fast. Miles shrugged. It's always fast. First, you're brave, then too loud, then angry, then dangerous. Jasper took a long sip of water before answering. Let them try. I didn't build Ellington Global to win applause. A soft knock interrupted them. Jasper opened the door cautiously. A hotel staff member stood outside. She was older, mid-50s, with curly gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her name tag read Eileen. She looked nervous, but also like she had something important to say. Mr. Ellington, I know this is unorthodox, but I just wanted to say thank you for what you did, for what your son endured. He nodded, moved by her sincerity. You didn't have to come all the way up. I did, she replied, because I've cleaned this floor for 9 years, and I've seen who gets to stay in these rooms. I never thought I'd see someone like you get treated the way you deserve. She paused, fidgeting with a cloth in her pocket. My grandson, he looks like your son, and every time he visits me at work, I'm afraid someone will ask why he's here, why he's in the wrong hallway. And after today, I feel like maybe he won't always have to be afraid. Jasper reached out and gently placed a hand over hers. What's his name, Malik? He's 12, smarter than all of us. Thinks he's going to be an architect. Tell Malik, Jasper said, that the world needs the buildings he's going to design. Eileen smiled, eyes wet. She bowed slightly and left quietly, letting the door close behind her. Miles watched the whole exchange without speaking. When it was over, he looked at his father, something shifting in his expression. You know, that's the first time I saw you really soft, he said. Jasper smiled. I'm soft where it matters. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, in a secure boardroom at the headquarters of Eastern Continental Airlines, panic had taken human form. The CEO, Leonard Packard, sat at the head of the table, white as the collar of his shirt. Around him were department heads, legal advisors, and the head of investor relations, all trying to spin yesterday's catastrophe into something survivable. "We're getting calls from all over," barked Nadine. "The VP of Communications, shareholders, senators, advocacy groups. The NAACP is requesting a formal audit. Ellington's legal team filed a demand for internal documents under federal transparency statutes." Leonard rubbed his temples. This was one flight. This wasn't one flight. Nadine snapped. This was a mirror, and it's reflecting everything we didn't fix for the last 20 years. An attorney cleared his throat. "There's also the matter of protocol failure. The flight crew was warned not to reassign upgraded passengers unless there was a security concern. The footage proves there was none, and the fact that the reassignment was for a white donor's son someone added. The silence that followed that statement was damning. The meeting stretched into hours. Policy review, HR shielding, attempted media counter-narratives, but every time they tried to redirect, the facts pulled them back. Miles Ellington, age 17, passenger in seat 1A, removed without cause. Staff refused to answer his questions, denied access to supervisor, was not reinstated even after father's arrival. Flight departed with first class half full. The footage of Jasper's calm but devastating speech had reached 42 million views in under 6 hours. Translated captions appeared in 11 languages. It was no longer just about one flight. It was about all the flights before it. Back in the hotel suite, Miles was writing. He sat at the small desk in the corner, Jasper's father's leather journal open before him. The pen moved slowly, but with purpose, not for the public, not for the media, just for himself. Jasper watched quietly. "What are you writing?" he asked. "A letter I'll probably never send. To who my future self?" Jasper considered that. "What are you telling him?" Miles looked up. "That it's okay to feel tired, but not to stay tired." Jasper smiled. "That's good advice." Later that night, Miles stood alone on the balcony. City sounds floated up gently. A soft wind blew across his face. He whispered something, barely audible. "I see you. Dad, I see why you fight." From the hotel lobby, a security officer glanced at the news playing on the monitor behind the front desk. It was showing a rerun of the speech. A child walking by looked up and pointed. "Mom, that's the guy from the plane." The mother looked, hesitated, then nodded. "That's the guy who told the truth." The morning sky over Washington was muted, soft gray streaked with threads of light. In a conference room 2 floors above the Eastern Continental Airlines headquarters lobby, the tension was no longer whispered. It had turned into a pulse, a vibration in the air. Leonard Packard stared into his reflection in the mirror behind the podium. His press secretary clipped a mic to his lapel, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He hadn't slept much. The crisis board had met 3 times since the Ellington flight went viral. Each meeting had ended the same way. Damage control failed. Spin attempts backfired. Now they were facing the press. And not just any press. Every major outlet. Every community leader. Even a few representatives from the Congressional Oversight Committee were in the crowd. He looked over at the table behind him where the rest of his executive team sat. Most avoided eye contact. He couldn't blame them. A week ago, they were fine, profits up, passenger satisfaction passable. Today, they were an international headline for the wrong reasons. He cleared his throat as the live stream countdown reached 0. "Good morning," Leonard began, his voice too dry. "As CEO of Eastern Continental Airlines, I want to address the events that occurred last Friday on Flight 1623 from New York to Dallas." He paused. It was the first time he had said the flight number out loud. It had become a kind of code in activist circles. Flight 1623. Printed on shirts, painted on protest signs, the number of injustice. He continued. A young passenger, Miles Ellington, was removed from his assigned seat in first class under a decision made by one of our flight attendants. That decision was not in line with company policy, nor was it supported by any legitimate operational concern. He took a breath. After a thorough review, and in consultation with our Diversity and Ethics Board, we have terminated the flight crew responsible, including the purser who refused to escalate the issue to her supervisor. Additionally, our Vice President of Passenger Services, as well as 2 senior gate managers who enabled the incident, have been relieved of their duties effective immediately. Murmurs rippled across the room. Leonard hesitated before continuing. He wanted to move on, talk about training programs, talk about reform, but something in the room shifted. A young black reporter in the 3rd row stood up, though the Q&A hadn't started. Why was a black teenager seen as disposable? The silence was louder than any response. Leonard blinked. "Excuse me, you've said what happened, but not why. What made your crew decide that Miles Ellington, a paying customer, didn't belong in that seat? What made his calm refusal so threatening? What made them comfortable ignoring protocol and choosing a donor's son over a CEO's?" Leonard started to answer, but stopped. There was no script for this. He looked toward the back of the room, where someone had just entered quietly. The reporters noticed and turned. It was Jasper Ellington. He walked with measured steps, no security, no entourage, just him and Miles, walking behind, steady but uncertain. Jasper nodded to the moderator, who stepped aside. Leonard moved from the podium like someone handing over a burden they were never built to carry. Jasper took the mic. He didn't speak right away. He looked out across the crowd, then directly at the young reporter who had asked the question. "My son was removed because someone decided he didn't fit their picture of privilege. Even in first class, even with a paid ticket, even with a calm demeanor and a polite tone, he was still seen as a threat." Miles watched from behind the curtain. His chest rose and fell in tight waves. Every word his father spoke carried weight, not just for the room, but for him. Jasper continued. "But this isn't only about one crew. It's about culture, a culture that made them feel justified, a culture that trains bias before it trains empathy." He paused and turned slightly, looking directly at Leonard. "I want to acknowledge that firing the staff is a start, but systems protect people who behave this way. Until the system changes, the cycle will repeat." There was a stirring in the room. Some reporters stopped typing and just listened. Jasper held up a small object. It was Miles's original boarding pass. Crumpled, slightly torn, but readable. "This," he said, holding it in the light, "was not enough to protect my son. Not from judgment, not from removal, not from humiliation." He placed it down on the podium like a verdict. Then he looked to his son. Miles stepped forward. A ripple of flashbulbs followed. He took the second mic. For a second, he didn't speak. Then he reached into his pocket and unfolded a note. It was handwritten. He began to read. "I wrote this the night we landed. I didn't think I'd ever say it aloud, but here we are." He swallowed hard. "To the crew of Flight 1623, I wasn't loud, I wasn't late, I wasn't unruly, but I wasn't welcome. Not because of anything I did, just because of what I am, and what you couldn't imagine I might be. The room was still. I am 17. I write music. I tutor younger kids in math. I help my dad fold his shirts because he doesn't know how to do it without wrinkling the collars. I am not dangerous. I am not aggressive. I am not invisible. Someone in the room choked back a tear. Miles continued, voice steadier. I don't want to be famous for what happened. I want to be remembered for how we made it stop happening. He stepped back. Jasper placed a hand gently on his shoulder. The moment lingered. Across the nation, the broadcast was live, in homes and schools and courtrooms, in corporate offices where black professionals sat silently in front of their screens and whispered, finally. Back in the boardroom, Leonard Packard stood still as if unsure if he should clap, speak, or simply listen. Eventually, someone at the back did clap, then others followed, not out of spectacle, but solidarity, and at that moment something shifted, not fixed, but shifted. In a room full of suits and scrutiny, a teenager had spoken truth, not with volume, but with clarity, and in doing so, he became more than a passenger on Flight 1623. He became a compass. Outside, the wind had picked up, but inside the building, something else was moving. Conscience. 3 days after the press conference, the world hadn't moved on. In fact, the tremors were only beginning. Jasper Ellington sat alone in the study of his home outside Arlington. His tie undone, his blazer hung over the arm of the chair, and a single light poured warmth onto a coffee-stained folder that didn't belong to him. It had arrived that morning. No return address. Just a small package dropped at the Ellington Foundation office with a yellow post-it that read, "For Jasper's eyes only," from someone who used to believe in the system. He had opened it slowly, unsure of what he was expecting. Inside were dozens of scanned employee reports, mostly internal documentation from Eastern Continental Airlines, but tucked in the middle, like a forgotten page in a church hymnal, was a letter, typed, anonymous, "Mr. Ellington, you don't know me, but I've known of you for years. I started working at Eastern Continental as a gate trainee in 2009. I believed it was a place of opportunity, but over time, I saw what others ignored. There were patterns, quiet removals, passengers of color being rebooked or downgraded without cause. Disruption was often code for discomfort. We were told to follow procedures, but certain preferred guests were quietly given priority, people who looked the part. People who fit an unspoken profile. Your son's experience wasn't isolated. It was simply the first time someone refused to disappear quietly. I'm enclosing copies of 4 incident reports I was ordered to delete. I didn't. I kept them, because I knew this day would come. Do what you must. You have a louder voice than the rest of us ever did. Signed, a former flight ops coordinator. Jasper's fingers ran along the edges of the pages. Each report mirrored the same sick rhythm, same euphemisms, same silent swapping of seats when the optics didn't sit well with someone higher up. He stared out the window, the quiet of the evening broken only by the low hum of Miles's playlist floating through the house. A mix of old soul, new jazz, and beats he created himself. Jasper rose, gathered the reports into a folder, and slipped it into his briefcase. He didn't know who the whistleblower was, but he knew what this meant. It meant Miles's pain wasn't just personal, it was systemic, and now he had evidence. Meanwhile, across town, Miles sat in his school's media room with his best friend, Jordan. Jordan had been quiet for most of the day, not because she had nothing to say, but because she had too much. So, they asked you to speak at assembly, she finally said, eyes locked on the screen where the viral clip of Miles speaking at the press conference had hit 12 million views. Yeah, Miles replied, unsure whether to smile or cringe. Principal Rowan asked if I'd talk about what happened, share something positive, use my platform, that kind of thing. Jordan raised an eyebrow. Positive Miles sighed. Yeah, I think they mean uplifting, safe, something to make the parents feel proud. Jordan turned to face him. More serious now. Miles, this isn't about making them feel safe. It's about telling the truth, and not everyone's ready for that. He looked down. His hands were still ink-stained from sketching lyrics earlier in the day. I don't want to make it about me. It is about you, she said, softer now. It's your name that got dragged, your face that trended, and your seat they gave away. He nodded. You think I should speak up? I think you already did. But maybe now you say what they weren't ready to hear the first time. That night, Miles sat on his bed with his laptop open. He started typing his speech, then deleting it, then typing again. He wrestled with how to start. Should he open with gratitude, with anger, with a quote? He looked around his room. On the wall hung the framed blueprint of the plane he'd fallen in love with when he was 8. Back then, aviation meant possibility, distance, horizons. Now it meant questions. He typed again. My name is Miles Ellington. I was removed from my seat in first class because someone didn't believe I belonged there. He paused, then added, I've been thinking about what belonging means. Not the kind you prove with a barcode or a boarding pass, but the kind you carry with you. Jasper knocked on the door. Got a second. Miles nodded. His dad stepped inside, holding the folder. I want to show you something, Jasper said, handing it over. Miles flipped through the pages slowly. What is this proof? Jasper said. That you weren't the first, and that they've been doing this for years. Miles's breath caught in his throat. So it wasn't just about me. No, Jasper replied, sitting beside him. It never was. But what you did changed the conversation. You gave it a face, a voice. They sat in silence for a long while. Eventually, Miles looked up. Then I have to speak. For the others. Jasper nodded. Yes, but speak for yourself first. That's where the power lives. The next day, inside the school auditorium, the lights dimmed as students filed into their seats. Teachers hushed chatter. Principal Rowan stood at the podium with a nervous smile. Today, she said, we welcome a voice that has become a symbol of resilience. A student many of you know, but few have truly heard. Miles stepped. The applause was polite at first, the kind of applause students give when they're not sure what comes next. A few friends in the front row clapped a little louder. Jordan gave a 2-finger salute from her seat near the aisle. Miles Ellington stood center stage beneath the warm white lights of Everhart Academy's auditorium. Behind him, the school seal shimmered faintly. In front of him, a sea of faces, peers, teachers, and guests. A few news cameras near the back, respectfully distanced. This was not a press conference. This was Miles's moment, and he was not here to be safe. He adjusted the mic, cleared his throat, then, with a breath he didn't know he'd been holding, he began. My name is Miles Ellington. I'm 16. I'm in 10th grade, and last week Someone decided I didn't look like I belonged in first class. There was a shift in the room, a quiet stillness. It wasn't because my ticket was invalid. It wasn't because I caused a problem. It wasn't because I made noise or refused to cooperate. It was because I sat in a seat they weren't used to seeing someone like me occupy. Miles let that land, not in a dramatic way, just plainly, like it was fact, because it was. Here's what I didn't say at the press conference. Here's what I've been thinking about since I got off that plane. He paused. I didn't just lose a seat. I lost something I'd been taught since I was a kid. That if you follow the rules, show respect, work hard, and stay calm, you'd be treated fairly. I lost that belief somewhere over 38,000 feet. The silence in the room thickened, but here's what I found. I found my voice. Not the one I use in English class or when I perform spoken word with my friends. I mean the voice that says, "This isn't okay," the one that says, "I'm not going to let you erase me quietly." He scanned the crowd, found Jordan, then Mr. Castillo, his history teacher, nodding solemnly. Some of you may think this was just a mistake, that maybe it was a bad call by one employee, but when mistakes only happen to people who look like me, over and over, it's not a mistake, it's a pattern. He glanced down at the paper in his hand, then set it aside. I had something written out. I'm not going to use it. Gasps rippled gently across the crowd. I want to speak from the place where it still hurts, because that's where truth lives. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. You see, when you're told to leave a seat you paid for, while people look away or pull out their phones but don't speak up, it teaches you something dangerous. It teaches you that your presence makes people uncomfortable. It teaches you to shrink. He let his arms fall to his sides. But I won't shrink. I won't apologize for being seen. And I won't be quiet when someone else's silence puts me in danger. Somewhere in the back, someone began to clap, then another. Soon the entire auditorium thundered with applause. Miles looked down for a moment, breathing in the moment, then continued. This isn't about revenge. I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here because I know some of you have been made to feel invisible too, maybe in smaller ways, maybe in ways no one else saw. But you know what I mean. He looked out and saw a freshman girl near the back wiping her eyes. A teacher had a hand on her shoulder. This world needs more people who are willing to name the harm, and then stay in the room to fix it. He walked back to the mic stand and added one final thought. I'm not leaving the room. When he stepped down from the stage, the principal tried to shake his hand, but Miles instead wrapped her in a brief but firm hug. Cameras clicked silently in the back, but this moment wasn't for them. It was for the kids watching. It was for the kids who needed to hear it. Later that evening, Jasper and Miles sat side by side on their patio as the sun dipped below the trees. You wrote all of that on your own? Jasper asked. Still moved? I started to. Then I decided I'd rather speak it, not read it. Jasper nodded slowly, pride and awe mingling on his face. You're brave. I don't feel brave. Miles replied honestly. I feel like I don't know what happens next. That, Jasper said, is what being brave actually feels like. They sat in silence, listening to the cicadas begin their nightly choir. In the days that followed, the video of Miles's assembly speech went viral. Again, but this time, it wasn't just news outlets picking it up. Schools, universities, parents' groups, youth movements. It struck a different chord. It wasn't a moment of outrage. It was a call to awareness. Eastern Continental Airlines, already in damage control, had another crisis brewing. One of the reports from the anonymous folder Jasper received had leaked. A whistleblower had sent it to a journalist at The Atlantic. The article hit digital shelves on Friday morning with the title Flight Pattern. The hidden biases of first-class flying inside were screenshots, names, dates, quiet records of what the company had long buried. The airline released a new statement that afternoon, one that was noticeably more humble, less rehearsed. We acknowledge a systemic failure that goes beyond one incident. We are launching a full independent investigation into our policies, personnel training, and historical records. We have invited civil rights leaders and equity consultants to participate in shaping a reimagined standard of dignity in air travel. Jasper sat in his office reading the statement out loud. That sounds like something written by a lawyer who just discovered humanity, he muttered. He forwarded the article to every member of the Ellington Foundation Board, including the subject line, "Not just a seat." Then, almost as an afterthought, he added one more line, "Miles just handed us a compass. Now we follow it." That evening, Miles received a message on his phone from a number he didn't recognize. "Hey Miles, my name's Darnell. I'm 17. I saw your video. Same thing happened to my mom in 2021. I didn't know how to talk about it. You helped. I'm with you." Then another. "I'm a gate agent, black woman. Watched too many people get shuffled around like they were luggage. I resigned last month. Thank you for speaking." And another. "They moved my daughter from her seat for a VIP. That VIP was someone with fewer points but whiter skin. We didn't fight it. I regret that now. We're with you." Miles stared at the screen, overwhelmed. The messages kept coming. Dozens, then hundreds. He looked up from his phone and whispered, more to himself than anyone else, "I guess I'm not alone." He wasn't, not anymore. It had been 2 weeks since the flight. 2 weeks since the moment Miles Ellington's quiet dignity shifted an entire conversation. 2 weeks since a white passenger's entitlement met a 16-year-old's resolve and lost. And now, in the grand hall of the National Civil Rights Museum, Jasper Ellington stood at a podium once reserved for senators and Nobel laureates, with his son beside him. The marble walls held stories of protest, pain, and transformation. There were photographs of lunch counters, marches, and arrests. But on this day, they were there to speak not of the past, but of a present that still bled. Jasper adjusted the microphone and took a long breath. His gray suit was pressed, but not flashy. His tone calm, but not soft. What happened on Flight 287 was not the first time a black person was told to give up their seat. We know this history. We carry it. But what makes this moment different is not that it happened. It's that my son said no, and the world heard him. He looked down at Miles for a moment. Miles, wearing a simple navy suit and his school pin on the lapel, gave a small nod. The staff involved in the incident are no longer with the airline. Jasper continued. That was never the goal. Accountability is important, but this is about more than jobs. This is about systems. A murmur of agreement spread through the room. Civil rights leaders sat shoulder to shoulder with airline executives, educators, journalists, and students. The invitation list had not been accidental. Jasper had personally curated every seat in the room. "We're not canceling people," he said. "We're canceling silence." He stepped back. The crowd stood in a wave of applause. But Miles was not done. He walked toward the mic, calm and steady. His voice was clearer now, not louder, but fuller. It was the voice of someone who had walked through fire and found clarity on the other side. When I was asked to give up my seat, I thought about all the moments my parents taught me to stay composed, to be polite, to speak well, to dress well, to always over-prepare. I thought it would protect me. He paused. The room leaned in. But I've learned that excellence doesn't always protect you. Sometimes it just unsettles people who weren't ready to see you in the first place. Some gasped. A few in the audience had tears in their eyes, but no one looked away. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just awake. And once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. He stepped down from the podium. Jordan was waiting in the wings and fist-bumped him silently. Reporters would later say that moment felt like watching a generation pass a baton without needing to say a word. Backstage, a woman approached them. She wore a blazer with a small pin shaped like a compass. Her hair was silver and tightly coiled. "I'm Gloria Watkins," she said, "former chair of the FAA Diversity Advisory Board. I just wanted to say thank you. Your story has already reshaped how we're thinking about national travel policy." Jasper thanked her, but it was Miles who asked the next question. "What does real change look like?" She smiled. "It looks like people who were never supposed to be at the table asking better questions than those who built the table ever considered." That evening, as the sun set over Memphis, Jasper and Miles boarded a different plane. This time, it wasn't Eastern Continental. It was a new line Ellington Air Charter, a small but symbolically powerful venture. Miles glanced at the embroidery on the headrest EAC. Beneath it, stitched in cursive, the words, "Your seat is your right." "Is that going to be your company's motto?" Miles asked, half teasing. Jasper didn't smile. He simply replied, "No, it's going to be our contract with the world." They landed in Washington, D.C., the next morning. Jasper had a meeting with lawmakers. Miles had a school tour at Howard University. Neither event was coincidental. At the Capitol, Jasper met with 3 senators, 2 members of the Transportation Committee, and the Secretary of Aviation Affairs. The goal was clear push for the Passenger Equity and Accountability Act PEEAA. The act would require all U.S. airlines to collect and publish data on customer complaints involving race, implement third-party bias training for all flight crew, and create a national ombudsman's office to investigate discrimination reports in air travel. Jasper had spent decades lobbying for innovations in software, artificial intelligence, and infrastructure, but nothing felt more important than what he was advocating for now. Meanwhile, at Howard, Miles walked the campus grounds. Students stopped him, professors greeted him, a few parents thanked him. But it wasn't the praise that stuck with him. It was the way people looked at him like he was already part of something larger than himself. On the flight home, Miles stared out the window. The clouds below were soft, endless, and slow-moving. Beside him, Jasper was asleep, his head tilted gently against the seat. "I didn't want to be the center of this," Miles whispered, almost to the glass, "but maybe I was supposed to be the start." Back home, Jordan was waiting with a surprise. She had gathered a group of students, activists, even a few sympathetic flight attendants, to form a new nonprofit. She called it Row 1, the mission advocate for equity in all public spaces, planes, trains, buses, courts, classrooms, anywhere someone was told they didn't belong. Miles was stunned. "You started this." Jordan grinned. "You lit the match. I just brought the lanterns." Their first campaign would be called Seat Check, a nationwide awareness week where volunteers would wear tags reading, "Ask me why this seat matters on major flights," and post stories of microaggressions anonymously. The goal wasn't confrontation, it was illumination. Miles agreed to be the first spokesperson, but he insisted every press interview include at least one of the flight attendants who had spoken out after his video went viral. He wanted the narrative to expand beyond himself. The final scene of their Movements short documentary ended with Miles reading a letter. It was addressed to a future child, no name, just "Dear Passenger." In the letter, he wrote about the flight, the seat, the humiliation, and the choice he made to stay calm but not silent. He ended it with a simple promise. "If you ever find yourself told to move, remember someone already stood so you could sit. You're not a disturbance. You are the destination." The screen faded to black, and in that silence, in homes across the country, something shifted. It wasn't just outrage anymore. It was memory. It was movement. It was legacy. He didn't shout. He didn't protest. He simply stayed seated with the full weight of history behind him. Miles Ellington reminded us that dignity isn't loud. It's lasting. That the fight against discrimination doesn't always wear signs or raise fists. Sometimes it wears a blazer, sits quietly, and refuses to move. This story is not just about a boy wronged. It's about every time someone was told they didn't belong. It's about what happens when silence is broken by calm, by clarity, and by courage. And it's a reminder every seat matters, because what we tolerate at 30,000 feet often reflects what we accept on the ground. As we close this chapter, we ask you, would you have stayed seated? Would you have spoken up? Let this story be more than a memory. Let it be a movement. If this story touched you, comment below. Let your voice join Miles's. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge injustice and celebrate quiet heroes. Together, let's make sure the next seat someone tries to take remains rightfully theirs. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, stay grounded, stay brave.